Welcome to the Fintech One-on-One podcast. This is Peter Renton, co-founder of Fintech Nexus and now the CEO of the fintech consulting company Renton & Co. I've been doing this show since 2013, which makes this the longest running one-on-one interview show in all of fintech. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Now let's get on with the show. Today on the show, I am delighted to welcome John Sun. He is the CEO and co-founder of Spring Labs. Now, Spring Labs is a super interesting company, been on the cutting edge of technology in fintech for many years. But I wanted to get John on the show now because I think what they're doing right now is just one of the most interesting applications or programs for generative AI that I've come across. We talk about what they're doing when it comes to helping frontline agents, helping complaint monitoring, and there's many different features of this product, which we do go into in some depth. But we also talk about a new event that Spring Labs is hosting that is coming up actually really quickly on October 7th, the AI Native Banking and Fintech Conference. John talks quite a bit about that, why they decided to do it, who it's for, what they're going to be covering on the day, and why people should attend. It really was a fascinating conversation. Hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the podcast, John.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate you having me. Excited to have a chat about this.
Sure. My pleasure. So let's kick it off by giving the listeners a little bit of background about yourself. I know you've been in the fintech space for a long time, but maybe you can talk about sort of some of the highlights of your career to date before Spring Labs.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you for having me, Peter. Have definitely been in the fintech space for quite a while. I think I was actually at one of the first Londons that you had hosted way back in the day. But really, my background is I started my career in fintech, running analytics and online retail finance for Innova. And this was kind of the very early days of online lending, the very early days of kind of what we call fintech today. And, from there, I kind of spent a couple years in San Francisco building fintech products with Y Combinator back in 2011 to 2012, and ultimately kind of wound down that business and started a lender in Chicago with my co-founders, Al and Paul, called Avant. And Avant was, one of the early pioneers, I would say, in the use of modern underwriting techniques for online lenders. We've done a lot of work very early on with machine learning techniques and using those in real-time customer underwriting. And I think that's, ultimately what gave us a bit of a competitive advantage over kind of other lenders of the time, and really was kind of the core of what kind of made Avant, different in its era. And in 2018, I left Avant to start Spring Labs. And the original mission of Spring Labs was to really productize the next generation of technologies that's likely to be transformative within financial services and make those technologies easy for folks to adopt and really use to benefit their customers.
Right. Yeah. And, I had your fellow co-founder, Adam Jawan, on back in 2020, and I'll link to that in the show notes, where you were talking about really building sort of the credit bureau of the future, or at least building sort of the data infrastructure for it. So tell us a little bit about the history of Spring Labs and how it has evolved over time.
Yeah, funny you bring that up. It's been quite a while since we were, really 100% focused on that particular piece of it. And I think really the history there is, when I started Spring Labs, the goal again was to figure out what are the next technologies that's going to be transformative, for financial services. We weren't super opinionated on which ones those were. And at the time, it really looked like blockchain technology was going to be something that was going to gain widespread institutional adoption, really kind of power the next generation of fintech startups. And that's where we had kind of went into it with the attitude of, well, where can we apply this technology to really interesting problems? And data exchange was one of these interesting problems where it was difficult for existing financial institutions to exchange data and to do it in such a way that you can preserve the anonymity of the sharers and preserve the privacy of the customers that you're sharing data about. And that was really the first kind of iteration. I would call it Spring Labs 1.0, was really about using the most cutting edge technologies to enable that data exchange. Ultimately, what we found was that institutional adoption of blockchain technology was a little slower than we would have liked.
Mm-hmm.
So we started really looking for, what are the other technologies on the horizon that's likely to be transformative. And that's where in kind of 2020 and 2021, we really started experimenting with, the earliest versions of generative AI and looking for opportunities to apply generative AI within financial services. And today, that's the majority of kind of our business is really building easily adoptable products and easily implementable generative AI products for financial institutions.
Okay, well, I mean, personally, I think it's a shame that first product didn't kind of work out. I thought it was groundbreaking, revolutionary, even at the time. But you might have just been a little bit ahead of your time there. But can you just dive into the product suite today? Like you talked about generative AI, but what are the applications for that you have in market right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you bring up that, maybe we're a little ahead of our time for the data exchange product. I still really believe in that product as well. I think there's a lot of value in that. Funny enough, we are still kind of running and maintaining a couple of different data exchanges using that technology. And I think the users are kind of getting a lot of value out of that. In terms of the generative AI products, there's a couple areas where, I really kind of wanted to focus the team. I think number one was on compliance. There's a lot of opportunities for the unique value that the generative AI technology kind of brings to the compliance sphere. And I think the other is kind of what we call conversational workflows or conversational agents, where essentially we're able to kind of convert the tools that you're already giving your customers or your agents in the form of kind of web or mobile applications and adapt those to have conversational interfaces, essentially allowing your users or your agents or your employees to interface with those tools by talking to a chatbot rather than kind of navigating a website or a web application. And I think there's obviously a lot of kind of unique value that generative AI brings to that capability as well.
Are you primarily focused on financial services for that? Because that obviously, when you talk about it like that, that could be just about anything. But how are you applying that to financial services?
Yeah, we are almost 100% focused on financial services. And I think the reason for that is I really believe vertical specialization is one of the only defensible competitive advantages in this AI field. I think there's going to be a ton of AI companies doing a ton of very similar things. But really, what unique advantage you can kind of bring is to understand your vertical well and to kind of bring a lot of the unique efficiencies and learnings that only you would have insights to within a particular kind of vertical. So as a result, we kind of only work within financial services. I think the other side of it, as most of your listeners probably know, is that building products for financial services is very different from building products for, say, e-commerce.
Right.
A lot more regulations, a lot more requirements for accuracy, a lot more basically that needs to be done. So as a result, we really wanted to tool our kind of toolkit to be the right solution for financial services clients.
How are your clients using the product? Are they augmenting their existing operation? Are they just replacing it? And I know you've done a lot of work around customer complaints. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing there.
Yeah, absolutely. And customer complaints was, one of the first use cases that we had deployed. And I talked about this on a couple of our own, webinars where customer complaints as a use case was really kind of deployed as a design partnership between us and several of the other major fintechs and sponsor banks in the space, where we had aggregated data from basically 100 different fintechs and built tools to help compliance teams manage incoming complaints and better understand what customers are telling them. And I think the reason we really honed in on that as a use case is a couple of different reasons. Number one, it is a uniquely good use of Gen AI technology. And Gen AI is obviously everything to everyone, it feels like, in this stage of development. But really what it's good at is it's good at processing human language and understanding conversations. And compliance use cases, especially around complaints, tends to have a lot of conversational elements to it. It's your customer talking to a customer service agent over the phone or over email or over chat or over text. They tend to be human language conversations. And that's both kind of what makes them difficult to process, as well as gives AI the unique advantage to kind of work within kind of that, that problem set.
So how are they using it? Are they like the call center or whatever, or the chatbot, whatever, however they're implementing it, might suddenly have like 50 complaints come in on the same day? Is that sort of how banks and fintechs looking at it? Oh, look, this new thing that we just released, there's some problems here. We're getting a lot of complaints. I mean, is that a sort of how they're using it?
We're all about augmenting kind of existing human capabilities with AI. I think the goal, exactly like you said, is how do we insert AI tools and products strategically into existing workflows to make the human agents more effective at their jobs. And if we really think about, the complaint handling process and where some of the inefficiencies or some of the challenges are, it's really around, can we train customer service agents to effectively recognize regulatory concerns or regulatory risks in their interactions with the customers? And then from there, can we help human agents better detect when there's kind of increasing activity in a particular type of complaint? I mean, obviously, I think that's something that humans are already natively doing today. But the challenge is, in order for one human agent who doesn't have access to kind of every single complaint that's coming in at a given time to be able to identify a pattern and really raise an alarm that something might be kind of trending in the wrong direction, is extremely difficult. Whereas with the AI tool that has the ability to kind of see across the organization, to see every single kind of complaint that's coming in or customer communication that's coming in, it becomes a lot easier for that tool to be able to create trendings of what's going on, identifying sort of the emerging risks or emerging issues.
Right. So what's the output from the tool then? Is it basically it's taking all this information and there's a human kind of overseeing it? Is the output, what is the output? I won't try and guess.
Yeah, there's a few different outputs to this. The first is, again, augmenting that human capability, augmenting that first line customer service agent or that second line compliance analyst in their day-to-day job. And what that means is using the AI to kind of take a customer contact, a customer communication, which is a very unstructured piece of kind of language data, and put structure around it in a way that makes it useful for the workflows for that customer service agent or for the compliance analyst. It means, again, taking a customer contact and first of all, helping the human agent determine, is this actually a complaint, or is it a dispute, or is it negative feedback, or is it an inquiry, or is it kind of just nothing? And that's really kind of the first step. And then from there, depending on which one it is, we further create more structured data from it. For example, what's the tone of the conversation? What are the topics or themes, we call them, identified within kind of that conversation? What are the regulatory threat vectors? Is there a UDAP allegation, a fair lending allegation, a fair credit reporting allegation? And then lastly, looking at, was this complaint or dispute or negative feedback addressed properly according to kind of the organization's, policies? So that's really the first set of, outputs, if you will,
Right.
is structuring the data so that it's useful to kind of the day-to-day employees handling customer communications and handling customer complaints. I think the other output is, now that we have all of this cool structured data, how do we help the folks overseeing the function generate better insights about what's going on with customer feedback and customer complaints? And that's kind of what we call the insights dashboards, where we're able to show exactly what's changing within your organization from a complaints perspective. Did you all of a sudden get 5 complaints about payment refund issues today, whereas you normally don't get any complaints about that? Does that point to a issue in technology? Does that point to an issue in a change in process or operations? And that really allows you to kind of very quickly get to the root of any changes within your product, which might have impact with regards to complaints, and helps you identify issues, quite frankly, order of magnitude faster than you would be able to rely on existing kind of human processes.
Really interesting. Really interesting. Yeah, I could see how that would be super useful. These customer service agents, the humans that are on the front line, they're not compliance experts, right? I mean, obviously there's training they have to go through, but I love that way you sort of framed it. So these people during the conversation can get a lot more intelligence. So they're not just trying to use, their own memory to figure out what is that regulation that applies here. And that sounds really, really powerful.
It is a topic that comes up quite frequently as an area that our clients are kind of looking for value from the product. And it's not just that these folks aren't, trained compliance professionals. They also have 50 other things to do as a part of their,
Right.
job, interfacing with customers. So this is kind of one of the 50 things. Whereas with an AI trained specifically to do this one task, that's the only thing it needs to worry about is how to do that one kind of task properly.
So I want to switch gears a bit. You and I have chatted several times earlier this year about kind of raising the profile of AI-focused solutions in financial services. And anyway, you decided to start a conference, which it's not an easy undertaking. So why did you decide to start an AI-focused conference?
I mean, I think I ask myself that same question every day as we're, T minus 16, 17 days to kind of launch here.
Right.
And I'm sure, I'm getting a small glimpse into kind of your world for many, many years. You had to deal with these types of issues, times 100, just given the scale of Lended and Fintech Nexus.
Right.
But I think, the juice is really worth the squeeze here. I think what we're trying to do is probably something that's very necessary in the space because what I'm seeing is, AI is probably the most talked about and least understood topic within financial services today. And, I hear a dozen different ideas every day on how banks that we're talking to or fintechs that we're talking to are planning to implement AI. And the crazy thing is, half of those ideas have nothing to do with Gen AI. It's traditional machine learning or it's kind of, basic analytics. And the other half are basically all about replacing call center agents. And there's just so much more depth to Gen AI than, the non-Gen AI stuff and then about purely kind of replacing call center agents or anything like that. And we thought it was kind of the right time to open up a discussion to have folks really share what they've been working on that's a little bit outside of the box, what's working, what's not working, and disseminating real practical information, practical implementations of hopefully imaginative use cases. And I think the other side of it is, the regulators. I think we need to have a conversation with the regulators because there's a lot of regulatory activity in the area.
Yep.
And, we're at a moment in time where the regulators themselves are still trying to figure out what they want to do with the technology and what they want us to do with the technology. So as a result, there's kind of this narrow window to really, share and promote, what some of the more consumer-friendly use cases of AI are to help shape their understanding of what's possible and in turn to hear from them on where their focus is, which helps us shape our focus on what we're trying to do with the technology.
So you decided not to locate this in the obvious places like San Francisco, New York, or DC. You decided to put it in Utah, not the first choice I think that most people would think of when it comes to sort of a fintech banking type event. So why Utah?
It's a great question. I think a lot of folks in the fintech space will kind of look at, Utah and immediately go like, oh, Utah, that kind of makes sense because there is a little bit of kind of background here. Utah has been kind of at the epicenter of fintechs for quite a while. It's just not a lot of people kind of think of it that way or know about it that way. A lot of the sponsor banks that power most of the brand name fintech, lenders and neobanks and credit card companies are based in Utah. And it's a combination of a few different aspects, obviously favorable regulatory environments, but also really just a conscious effort by the Utah government to prioritize fintechs, which makes it kind of an ideal home for the growth of kind of fintechs. And really the reason we're basing it in Utah is I think it has, again, great sponsor banking presence. I think it has great banking presence. A lot of the fintechs that we want to share their experiences on AI adoption probably kind of make their way out to Utah to meet with their sponsor banks on a pretty regular basis. Mm-hmm. So it becomes a pretty natural location to kind of have the right folks represented all kind of in one place.
And it seems like the governor's really gung-ho here because I saw the governor of Utah's actually speaking at Money 2020 later in October. So that sounds like from the very top, Utah is really focused on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of what we're seeing as we were kind of planning this event as well, is we've gotten just an incredible amount of support from the folks within Utah. I mean, just specifically, to call out, the Utah Governor's Office for Economic development, the Utah Bankers Association, the Stena Center at the university there. I think they've really kind of done a great job of aligning a lot of different organizations within Utah behind this goal of making Utah, again, really, the epicenter of fintech and kind of banking growth.
Okay, so who are you trying to attract? Who is attending this event?
I think the main audience we're trying to attract is the fintechs that are building cool, cutting edge kind of technologies for consumer products, within finance. The sponsor banks kind of backing, these fintechs, as well as kind of other banks that are looking into AI adoption, as well as the regulators kind of thinking about how to use AI to better kind of enforce their policies, or how AI could be harmful or beneficial to kind of consumers. And really, those are the three parties to the conversation that we want to have. That being said, I think the event is designed to be very practical, not high level theoretical about AI. So within these organizations, really, we're looking for kind of practical leaders, like folks in executive leadership or compliance or operations or marketing, folks that's going to benefit from the technology and need to understand it from kind of a ground level. And I think that's where the main focus is. But I think over time, I think there's been a lot of other kind of interested parties and interested groups that's kind of become kind of a part of the journey here.
Okay, so then let's talk about the agenda, what topics you're actually going to be covering. Maybe just run through some of the highlights there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the focus, again, is going to be on practical application. So we're going to be talking about things like, what are the AI kind of tools or options available for using AI within compliance, or using AI within customer experience or customer service or operations. We're going to be talking about, the practicals of how do you implement AI within an organization, and what are some of the compliance considerations in implementing AI from a model risk governance or a safety and kind of soundness, perspective. And I think we're going to be, hearing hopefully from the regulators on, what their view on AI adoption is, what are the types of things they're going to be looking for as they're kind of develops a playbook for AI adoption within, financial institutions. And we're really kind of hoping a lot of kind of the conversation is going to kind of come from our excellent set of panelists and moderators and keynote speakers, as well as from kind of the audience who are going to really inform what are the types of topics that's going to be relevant to the development of AI adoption within kind of the coming months and years.
I'm looking at the agenda on my computer here. You've got some heavy hitters. You got Brian Brooks, the former acting comptroller of the currency, and I think he is one of the smartest people in all of financial services. I just love listening to him talk. And then you've also got the Vice Chairman of the FDIC, Travis Hill. Looks like he's going to be interviewed by Phil Goldfeder, our friend from the AFC. So you've been able to attract some decent names here, and I see you're going to be featured as well, John. When you're looking at the agenda and just the day in general, what are the things that you're most excited about personally?
I am, by experience and most of my career, a huge data geek. So naturally, I'm going to be really drawn towards the more data-centric topics. I think there's going to be a lot of practical data about implementations that have kind of happened as a part of much of the agenda. So I think I'm pretty excited to kind of hear from folks on what's actually been going on, the numbers behind the stories behind kind of AI. And obviously, we've kind of seen some of the early headline numbers that folks in the industry have been releasing about the impact of AI within the industry. But really excited to kind of see what direction that's headed within the specific organizations of kind of the participants.
And then will people, if they're listening to this, obviously I'll link to the event in the show notes. Are tickets going to be available right up until the last minute?
Yes, tickets are available right up until the last minute. Definitely strongly encourage everyone to grab their tickets if they haven't already. The prices do kind of go up at the last minute. But even if you didn't get a chance to purchase a ticket yet, there's definitely still time. Please do that. Would love to see you guys in person in Salt Lake. I think it's going to be a great event. I will also call out that we did set aside a limited number of free tickets for kind of industry experts and practitioners in the spaces that we want to highlight. And some of those are still available. So if you're interested, I strongly encourage you to go on the website, this conference.springlabs.com, and apply for one of those kind of free tickets and spots available.
Is your plan to have this become like an annual event, or is this just a one-off?
We want to have the conference for as long as the topic continues to be relevant and interesting. And I think AI tech is going to be at the forefront of innovation for many years to come. I think the format of what we talk about is probably going to change from year to year based on kind of what the latest needs within the industry for AI adoption, the understanding of AI is. But I think it's safe to say that the conference, I think, will be making a return if the topics will be different.
Maybe we can close by, I'd love to kind of get your vision for Spring Labs as you kind of, you've got this event, which obviously is going to help drive the industry forward, hopefully, most likely. But as you kind of just put that aside for a second and just look at what you're doing at Spring Labs, what's your vision? Where do you hope to take this?
Great question. It's again a question I ask myself oftentimes, and I'm not sure I have kind of the best answer. But I will kind of tell you a bit of the background behind what the mission we're trying to really achieve at Spring Labs is. If I think back to again what we did well at Avant in the early days, this was again the very early days of fintech in 2012, 2013. When it was basically, just us and Lending Club and Prosper, and we made up essentially the, prime and near prime fintech space. What we did really well was lean into the latest cutting edge technologies. And at the time, it was machine learning technologies like gradient boosting models and what's called XGB models. And that gave us a source of competitive advantage, but it wasn't kind of without, cost and perils. There was no infrastructure for deploying this type of technology. So we essentially had to build everything from the ground up. And it's an investment that, most companies wouldn't have been able to make. And certainly, most banks wouldn't have known how to make. And, fast forward to 2018, when I started Spring Labs, the idea was, how do we, again, make it easy to adopt the next generation of these technologies in kind of a form that is easy to implement, as well as, ROI positive kind of from day one. And that's really what we're hoping to accomplish with a lot of the AI products that we're building, is to create an easy, attractive revenue generating or ROI positive, at least, way for financial institutions to adopt, I think, this great, technology in generative AI that's likely to be transformative kind of for many years to come.
We'll have to leave it there. Good luck with that, and good luck with the event on October 7th. I'm very disappointed I actually can't come myself because it happens to be my daughter's 16th birthday. So otherwise, I would definitely have been there. But best of luck with everything. I hope it goes well. And thanks for coming on the show, John.
Thank you so much.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you so much for listening. Please go ahead and give the show a review on the podcast platform of your choice, and go tell your friends and colleagues about it. Anyway, on that note, I will sign off. I very much appreciate you listening, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.